Welcome to the NAIA's May 2021 National Convention. The NAIA's Office of Student Athlete Experience and Development is happy to present this session focused on student athlete academic support services and programs. This session, focused on student athlete academic issues, will include 4 sections. The first presentation, from Stephen Sherman, will look at an institution's absence policy. Next, we will hear from Alexis Rash about grade monitoring for student athletes. After that, we will hear about study hall setup and tutor program from Brandon Mizuraka and Sarah Green. Finally, we will hear from Robert Grime about partnering with institutional research to identify DFW rates.
First of all, I would just like to thank all of you for tuning into this, and then I'd like to preface this presentation by saying that my goal is not necessarily to provide an exact blueprint for this type of policy and procedure. If that's in fact what happens, that's great, but I think if all of you can just get 1 or 2 bits of quality information from this that you can take back and utilize in the creation of your own policies and procedures, or perhaps the improvement of policy and procedures, then I'll have been successful. We wanted to identify who our allies in the process could be. So we involved the folks from academic advising, the academic advisors. We obviously wanted our faculty athletic rep to be involved in the process. We're also fortunate enough to have created an athletics advisory council here that's made up of various faculty and staff members. And then we also even involved the deans and the provost. The goal was to cast a wide enough net when it came to piecing together allies, was to make sure that our policy and procedure was scrutinized on a level that was going to really lead to ultimately buy-in and ultimately efficiency of the procedure. Like I mentioned with the previous slide, we put together the allies that we did to ensure that we were going to get adequate feedback, and beyond adequate, actually, we wanted to have really quality feedback. So obviously, once we identified our allies and had a rough concept of the policy and procedure on paper, then we spent 2 to 3 weeks with the various entities previously identified with the allies, as allies, I should say. And that document was a living document at this time for this 2 to 3 week period, where we would kind of throw it out there and then get input back and then make changes along the way. Once we got that living document to a point where we felt like it was close to, if not a final draft, we then moved to get it endorsed. And the body that we felt best for that was the Faculty Senate. It wasn't the entire faculty, but it was a good portion of faculty members and faculty members that are in leadership roles. So again, we felt like that would be a good body to ultimately endorse it. And so we were invited to a Faculty Senate meeting where we presented our policy and procedure to them, showed them the actual document, and discussed it. And then we had a question and answer session with the Faculty Senate, and there weren't too many comments at that point. I feel like we had gotten to a point where it was fairly scrutinized to the point where there wasn't just a whole lot to be said. So it was ultimately endorsed by the Faculty Senate with little to no opposition, at least that I'm aware of. Regarding any expenses that were incurred or ultimately paid out, that there were none. I mean, other than, time and effort on behalf of multiple individuals, there was no cost. It's one of the great things about this is that it truly isn't costing us anything, not even in materials. So, yeah, free, which is obviously a great price. There weren't any costs for creating this policy and procedure and establishing, but there definitely were mistakes, and there are going to be mistakes made. That's key. There's no way to do something like this, to create policy and procedure of this nature, without making mistakes. And quite frankly, there's without the benefit of complete hindsight at this point, there's probably more we're even going to find. But at this point, what we have identified is initially we failed to direct or educate the student athletes on how to send the form letters, and the form letters are mentioned in the document for the policy and procedure. They were simply attaching it, and several professors found that off-putting. So we instructed them that they did need to write a greeting in the body of the email, and then we instructed the coaches who are CC'd on these emails to further coach the student athletes on how to send those out in a way that is professional and is following etiquette. So also early on, failing to realize that there might be some faculty members that might not know how to access the travel schedule and travel roster on SharePoint. And so we did create a companion piece for how to access those files on SharePoint. For the benefit of everybody who's tuned into this presentation, I also feel like it's key to go over mistakes made at previous institutions by any number of the people involved in creating this policy and procedure, whether myself or any of the allies. The first part about that is thinking that this type of policy procedure can be created within the athletic department and gain institutional buy-in. That's just not likely. It's improbable. Also thinking that total institutional buy-in is possible. So on the flip side, you're never going to convince everybody within the faculty that this is the best way of doing it, or rather your way of doing it is the best way. Also failing to define in the early stages of creation what the purpose is. And this is key. You've got to know what the need and purpose is of a policy and procedure before creating it. So that seems obvious, but it sometimes is not. The next thing is making it too complicated, making it a cumbersome process. And on the flip side of that, making it too simple, making it to where it fails to meet the needs of your defined purpose and need for it. And then finally, thinking that the policy and procedure can be simply spread to the faculty by word of mouth or experience. For the benefit of everybody who's tuned into this presentation, I also feel like it's key to go over mistakes made at previous institutions by any number of the people involved in creating this policy and procedure, whether myself or any of the allies. The first part about that is thinking that this type of policy procedure can be created within the athletic department and gain institutional buy-in. That's just not likely. It's improbable. Also thinking that total institutional buy-in is possible. So on the flip side, you're never going to convince everybody within the faculty that this is the best way of doing it, or rather your way of doing it is the best way. Also failing to define in the early stages of creation what the purpose is. And this is key. You've got to know what the need and purpose is of a policy and procedure before creating it. So that seems obvious, but it sometimes is not. The next thing is making it too complicated, making it a cumbersome process. And on the flip side of that, making it too simple, making it to where it fails to meet the needs of your defined purpose and need for it. And then finally, thinking that the policy and procedure can be simply spread to the faculty by word of mouth or experience.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex Roush, and I'm the head women's swim and dive coach and Champions of Character liaison at the University of Jamestown. Today, my presentation is on grade monitoring, successful approaches, and best practices. The topics I'll be covering in my presentation today are the student-athlete lifestyle, open communication and commitment, grade monitoring approaches, challenges presented by these approaches, and looking to the future. Student athletes have a really busy performance-based lifestyle where they're constantly finding a balance between social, athletic work, and academic demands without becoming overwhelmed. For many student athletes, college is the first time in their life where they're responsible to balance and keep track of all these things on their own without the assistance of their parents. Eventually, they're going to set priorities for themselves, and in many instances, grades are not the priority that they set. Because of this, poor academic performance can cause stress and overall impact the student athlete's athletic performance and down the road, possibly their eligibility. Grade monitoring and improved academic performance can help create a positive motivational climate and identify barriers to motivation that may be caused by stress due to poor academic performance. Coaches, faculty, and student athletes must maintain open and effective communication, and regular assessments must be conducted on both macro and micro cycles. And one of the easiest ways to assess grades is through grade checks. So, what are some of the more effective approaches we can take to grade monitoring? First, we can come in on micro and macro cycles. Some microcycle example would be weekly individual grade checks where an athlete fills out their grades and they have their professor sign it and then turn it into coach. A macrocycle example would be distributing to head coaches a report for all the athletes on their team of mid-semester or end of semester grades with their degree progress reported and past credits as well. In addition to micro and macro cycles, grade monitoring and support can be implemented on campus through a student athlete academic center, where the center has adjusted hours that actually fit the practice schedules for all of the teams on campus. I know sometimes teams practice early or late in the day, and it makes it so athletes don't have as much access to academic support on campus. That academic center can also provide technology loans for students that may not have their own personal technology. They might depend on the computer lab that's on campus more than other student athletes. And when you travel for competition, they won't have access to that. They might have the excuse, coach, I can't turn in my stuff when we travel. Having that student athlete academic center with technology loans gets rid of that problem. Also, academic mentors, as we mentioned earlier, student athletes live in a high performance lifestyle. And having academic mentors there, especially to mentor those underclassmen that are really stepping into this world for the first time, can make a huge, huge difference in the success of student athletes. And also access to tutoring and scheduling tutoring for times that work well for practice schedules and class schedules is also a benefit of having a student athlete academic center. In addition to a center, we should also make sure we're using athletic academic advisors on campus. These are academic advisors that specifically are educated about the needs of student athletes and what they need to make sure they're enrolling in to stay eligible as student athletes. In addition to knowing about enrollment credit-wise and grade-wise for student athletes, these athletic advisors can also help with course enrollment and degree planning, which is especially important if you find yourself having an athlete that may be in a major that would require a fifth year of school, or maybe they're redshirting for a season, and just navigating through that whole world of things can be really helpful when your advisor is knowledgeable about what's required for your student athletes on an academic and an athletic side of things. And then finally, implementation of an early support or an early alert system is really great with keeping communication open between student athletes, professors, and coaches, especially around weeks 5 through 7 of the semester. Early alert systems can be set up in various ways, but essentially what they do is provide professors specifically with an outlet to reach out to coaches, writing center, tutors, maybe campus counseling, your student athlete, everyone that needs to be involved in the situation essentially, all at once to keep everyone there on the same page and provide as much support and reporting as required to make sure that that student athlete is on the right track for success. These approaches come with various challenges. Faculty have reported that signing weekly grade checks greatly increases their responsibilities they have on campus. Early alert systems often provide notifications, but no clear paths of what students should do next. Increased overhead can happen from the implementation and operation of student athlete academic support systems. As we look to the future, we want to make sure we address the challenges that come along with the grade monitoring systems that we implement on our campuses. Weekly grade checks can be verified through printing of grades posted online instead of requiring faculty signatures. Pathways can be made clearer for early alert students instead of overwhelming our system with just notifications. We can incorporate not only notifications to coaches, but also to academic centers on campus, such as the tutoring and writing center, and making sure we follow up with student athletes 1 to 1.5 weeks after this early alert system notification has been sent out to make sure they're on a pathway to success. Costs of digital systems, such as an early alert system, can be reduced by using free or already implemented platforms at the school, such as Google or Microsoft Suite, as you'll see in the next slide. And costs of in-person systems, such as a student athlete academic center, can be reduced by the use of work-study tutors and redistributing advising assignments to professors to create athletic-specific advisors for each department. The school can also save money by recycling old technology into their student athlete academic center to be loaned out to student athletes instead of going out and buying brand new technology. Right here, we can see an example of Shaw University's website where they implemented their early alert system. Right here, this first page on the left, you can see that they describe their early alert system, and then professors can click this button right here and it brings them to the early alert system form. Right here, we can see they fill out information about the student on the early alert system form. Then they can check off the boxes of the support center or the outlets on campus they think the student would benefit from the most. Those people will be notified. They also have non-academic concerns, which is a great thing to also include on there. Things such as personal problems or accidents can be reported on there, and they can be referred to the counseling center on campus. In conclusion, the responsibility of grade monitoring is a group effort that involves coaches, faculty, and student athletes. Digital and in-person approaches ranging from early alert systems to micro and macro cycle grade checks to student athlete academic centers can provide platforms for grades to be checked, monitored, and addressed. When possible, the use of online systems can help take the workload off of faculty. And we should also try to redistribute or recycle positions on campus, such as athletic academic advisors or supplies, such as technology, to create a more budget-friendly academic center.
Given today's climate where student athletes are now more than ever seeking reasons and rationales, it is important to understand both your own personal whys as well as the whys of your current academic plan. First, you need to understand your own personal whys. Each and every coach, sport, university can have their own different driving forces when it comes to academic achievement and progression. This said, it is important to know yours as well as that your student athletes know yours as well. This will be your baseline. Going from this baseline, you are then able to move into the current academic plan that you have in place. And analyzing your current academic plan, you should be able to understand and highlight why this plan is in place. This reason can be the same as your own personal why, as this will provide the maximum amount of weight. Ultimately, not having a reason is a recipe for disaster, though. You would not make practice or game plans just because. With this in mind, you are now able to look at the current system in place and ask if things are working effectively or not, and to come up with areas in which can be tweaked or changed to adapt and ultimately better serve your student athletes going forward. In this chart, we have provided data from the program since its inception in the fall of 2019. Each semester, we have continually gone back to the drawing board in an effort to effectively and efficiently adapt to the change and provide better resources to spur on continued academic achievement and academic progression inside our program. It is important to understand when coming up with an academic plan, it is not a one-size-fits-all. Each and every student athlete's academic background is different, and so are their needs. This means that as well as implementing a baseline academic plan, it's important to create an additional plan for individual student athletes. This plan can be based on the root cause of issue for that student athlete. I have found two primary reasons for academic issue, one being subject comprehension, where the student athlete may not understand the subject material, or course workload, where the student athlete does not handle the time rigors needed to achieve high marks in the course. Whatever it is, the issue or issues must be identified, as it will be the guiding factor of where the emphasis of the individual academic plan will go. Whereas subject material or subject comprehension would equal more tutoring-based learning, where the student athlete can ask more questions and get more guidance on specific topics. Additionally, for those that are struggling with course workload, adding additional study hall hours would be a good option to allow them more time to actually focus specifically on that one class. When identifying these issues, communication with the student athlete is key. First, they need to know that you care, especially when you are adding more hours. They need to understand that this is not a punishment that these hours are being added to them. We here have found that highlighting the student athlete's why to be very effective, meaning that asking what their future plans are upon graduation and what their end goal is provides valuable guidance and valuable light at the end of the tunnel to allow them to effectively get through this progression. Lastly, it's much more effective when the student athlete is in the driver's seat. They are much more committed when they feel they have a say in their learning. In addition, use all the resources available. Every university I've been at has had amazing academic resource centers that sadly sometimes get underused as students either don't know or are afraid to ask for help. Creating a culture where student athletes understand and utilize these resources at their disposal creates value and allows the student athlete to take a leap in their academic progression. Simply put, using these resources creates and shows commitment towards their academics and fosters the characteristics that so many employers are looking for when hiring. Here is a copy of our Spring 2021 academic plan. This plan was implemented at the start of the semester as we look to push the team's overall GPA by 0.6 from the previous semester. This plan continued with one mandatory day of study hall for all men's soccer student athletes and was scheduled from 3 to 5 p.m. on every Monday. In addition, we sought to provide an additional study hall session for those student athletes under a 275 cumulative GPA, which we completed at the same time on Wednesdays. While only required for those student athletes under a 275, we did find student athletes who were above this mark still attending. A consistent message to us was that it allowed them the opportunity to focus solely on their coursework. With grade checks being reported at the 4, 8, and 12-week marks, we utilized these grades to assess any additional hours needed for our student athletes to ultimately succeed in each course. Once a student athlete showed in a next grade check their grades had improved, the hours would then be adjusted. In addition to the meetings with our men's soccer student athletes to discuss their grade checks, we felt a need to go a step further and create a bi-weekly meeting to discuss each individual's academic progression in each course. When meeting with each student athlete, the coaching staff would sit down and discuss each class. With the syllabus for each student as well as their academic calendar, the coaching staff could better track the progression in each course. These meetings were set in a way to encourage dialogue between the coaching staff and the individual student athlete. In these meetings, the main point was to isolate what issue or issues the student athlete was experiencing. Going through these conversations, we could better gauge what the right dosage of study hall and tutoring would be. Ultimately, this required open lines of communication between the coaching staff, the student, the professor, and the Academic Resource Center staff.
Thank you, Coach Mizuraka. My name is Sarah Green, and I'm the Dean of the Academic Resource Center here at Oklahoma Panhandle State University. When building the scaffolding for the Academic Resource Center, the idea was to try to shift the culture of the existing support system. We found that most students were utilizing services at a point late in the semester where the support that could be offered might not be enough. We wanted to change and evolve in that mindset, put the resources in place that would allow for immediate and continued support, and provide a framework that set the student up for success from the beginning. In 2018, we knew that we just weren't doing enough and that we could do better. We tore down the existing support system and did a complete overhaul. And not only were we going to change the way we would offer support to our student athletes, but we also changed the location of our services. Our evolution was beginning. Over the course of the following academic year, the athletic offices and the Academic Resource Center would become housed in the same building and in a central location on campus. This has allowed for collaboration between the Academic Resource Center and athletics that just wasn't in place before. One of the first programs we built was a peer mentoring program. In this program, each freshman is assigned a mentor from day one. This gives them an upperclassman who is just a call or text away, someone who has been there and done that, so to speak. This has allowed us to expand the communication to students about the resources and services that are available to them. This, too, is a continually evolving program. With the acquisition of a Title V grant, we are now able to expand this service even more. This fall, we'll be able to provide an additional service through the Hispanic Student Services Center, which will have targeted advisement and adult mentors. This will allow us to offer even more support and provide bilingual services as needed to our student athletes. Our mentors are trained to help the student athlete hone his or her time management skills. Coach Mizuraka has his athletes keep calendars, but many of the student athletes that come to us are at a complete loss as to how to balance the full-time job of being a student with another full-time job, that of being an athlete at the collegiate level. It can be quite overwhelming, particularly for the freshmen. To help navigate the time management piece, we pay for and load into our student accounts an e-tutoring service. This gives them access to tutoring on the road or after hours. We still offer tutoring during regular office hours with peer tutors, and I find that typically the lower classmen prefer that style of in-person tutoring. The way that athletic grade checks are done has also evolved. Gone are the days of signing grade checks and sending them for review by the coaches. Our athletic department actually does grade checks electronically 3 different times through the semester. This allows for shared data with our office and allows us to have more opportunities to reach out to the student. I hope this gives you some background on our growth and evolution as a resource for our student athletes, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
This presentation is about how an athletics department can reach out across campus to the Office of Institutional Effectiveness or Institutional Research and look at data to help establish a study hall program or tutor program. Remember, this presentation is just the beginning of a conversation. If any athletics department member wants to visit with their friends across campus in the Office of Institutional Effectiveness, this presentation might be able to walk them through the beginning of that conversation. Sometimes an athletics department has good intentions by devoting some energy and resources and funding to a study hall space, but they don't necessarily dissect the problem as needed. Sometimes they hire really smart tutors, but maybe their student athlete just needs help with organization and time management. Sometimes a department will require study hall hours, But if the student just sits in front of a computer by themselves, sometimes they could use more assistance discussing an assignment, or maybe a small group project. Also, there are times when a student's issue is really just intimidation of visiting their instructor, or perhaps admitting out loud when they're struggling in a class. And finally, sometimes tutors are hired who are experts in a subject, let's say history, but a particular course, Western Civilization 2, for example, might be taught a little bit differently. So student athletes taking that course need guidance from someone who has taken that specific class. The concept behind this presentation really isn't new. Coaches do it all the time when they game plan for their opponents. They scout them, they scout the opponent, they scout themselves, they identify their own strengths and weaknesses before and during a game, and all this presentation wants us to do is to apply that same concept to the classroom. Remember, this presentation is not a prescription. Schools do not have to follow this to the letter. It is more the beginning of a conversation. Include your campus character liaison, your faculty athletic rep, one of our colleagues from the institution's effectiveness office, someone from the athletic department's academic support area, and maybe someone from academic affairs. This group can get together over lunch and have a pleasant conversation about how to explore using data to improve your athletics study hall and tutor program. When you gather the research team to talk about this project, you will pull all kinds of information. Some will be historical data of each specific course, perhaps looking back for the last 5 years at the DFW rate. That is, the percentage of students in a particular course who receive a grade of D, F, or withdraw. You can also look at information about the students taking those courses, such as their admissions information. During the semester, you can work with academic units to compare performance with real-time data, such as class attendance. This approach really is similar to game planning for a contest. It also enhances collaboration between athletics and each academic unit. Finally, if there is anyone working for tenure or someone looking to publish an article about applying research to real-world problems, this could be a publication opportunity. Listed here are the data fields that were requested when looking at DFW rates. During the semester, some departments might be willing to provide information about that semester's student athletes during the term. Perhaps the instructor gives midterm grades, or perhaps week 5 and week 10 grades. When they do, these additional fields might shed light on what works and what keys success in those classes. Looking at the number of absences. Is homework submitted on time? Does a student attend test prep sessions or supplemental instruction sessions? Have they been to the office hours? Have they emailed the instructor? How often do they attend their weekly check-ins? How often do they meet their tutors? And how much time do they spend on coursework in online courses? At my most recent institution, College Algebra and College Algebra 2 had a staggering 85% DFW rate and 52% DFW rate, respectively. The department chair and I looked at all historical and current term data and found something that was rather staggering. A student who did not visit their instructor during office hours and who did not spend at least an hour on their homework assignments had a 100% chance of getting a D, F, or W. Students who did spend an hour on every homework assignment and who did visit their instructor during office hours finished the semester 100% of the time with either an A, B, or C. This helped our department establish a required study hall 2 nights a week with 2 tutors, one from the athletics department and one from the math department. Both tutors worked the room as needed for 2 hours every Tuesday and every Thursday. This provided student athletes the focus and dedication to get their homework done. It is very important that the working group understand the goals of this project, both what they are and what they are not. The aim is to identify trends, performance indicators, and objectively place resources and game plan for the semester. The goals are not to avoid certain courses or teachers or majors, and it is not to postpone required courses. Many institutions already pull DFW rates for certain courses. If this is the case on your campus, all you would have to do was separate out pulling those students with a student athlete flag in your campus student information system. For schools that use Banner, this is very easy. Also, keep in mind, the first time setup of this process seems cumbersome, but after that, each semester is easier. And finally, after securing the data, your athletics representatives, your faculty athletic reps, your colleagues from the provost office or institutional effectiveness should review and process the report together over a nice working lunch. Although not directly related to this presentation, an outstanding program that your institution might look into for high DFW courses and how to support your students through them, visit UMKC's Supplemental Instruction Model. Please reach out if you attempt a program like this summer. And also, be on the lookout for this PowerPoint handout and all other CCL presentations within the next week. Each of today's presenters have listed their contact information on this slide should you want to reach out and discuss in depth how you can implement a program similar to the ones presented. You will also receive a one-page handout about each presentation.